Welcome back to Data and Drams. In this episode, I was joined by James Wilson, a partner in data and AI at Mantle Group. James shares his fascinating and truly diverse career journey, starting from his early days in the Big Five consulting world, with international experiences in London, Zurich, and France, all the way to leading major transformations across a range of industries. Our conversation dives deep into the three distinct phases of his professional life, highlighting pivotal moments at companies like REA Group, Tabcorp, and Telstra, and eventually leading to his current role at Mantle Group, which focuses on leveraging AI and data for business growth. James emphasises the importance of soft skills and leadership, focusing on intentional listening, communication, and the crucial work of building authentic relationships. We also explore the rapid impact of generative AI and data in today's corporate landscape, touching upon the excitement and challenges that come with these emerging technologies. Now for the dram. While we were being responsible adults and met for lunch on a working day, you know that I couldn't let James leave empty-handed. So he did go home with an Archie Rose single malt whiskey, and I heard it on good authority that he very much enjoyed it that evening, and I eventually got to try it myself at the Whiskey Live Expo on the Gold Coast earlier this year. Crafted to highlight 6 malts for a richer, more expressive flavour, this whiskey is matured in a unique combination of Australian Apra, ex-bourbon and ex-rye casks, delivering a palette of sticky date pudding, amaretto and espresso. James's deep dive into intentional listening, communication and the importance of soft skills offers a crucial counterpoint to purely technical focus. His journey proves that great leaders are built on more than just code. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink and join James and I for Data and Drams. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you are a partner in data.
Yep.
That's your official title.
That's correct.
Partner in data at Mantle Group.
Data and AI, come on.
Data and AI, sorry.
Can't drop that off.
Can't drop that off. Can you tell me a little bit more about your career journey? Was it linear? Was it always data? Or was there something in particular that kind of drove you towards that space?
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning, and there's probably like 3 discrete like phases so far. Hoping there's going to be more, but there's kind of phase 1, which I guess is for like most people, right? You start your career and you don't really know exactly where it's going to go and how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
And, I didn't study software engineering, computer science, so I'm not I'm not an engineer by trade at all.
Okay.
And I wound up working in Big 4 at the time. Sorry, Big 5 then, before it was Big 5. So I worked for a company called Arthur Andersen, which were part of the Big 5, and they're not around anymore, which is probably a whole separate podcast.
Yep.
But I guess that place helped me get kind of good at understanding how to be successful in a corporate environment, like how to get stuff done in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
And I got to move internationally there as well, which was really cool. So I got to work on some really interesting projects.
And internationally where?
So I lived in London then. I worked in London, and I spent a whole bunch of time in Switzerland working on a really interesting project in Zurich for like almost a year on and off.
That would have been beautiful.
Yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, surrounded by people similar stages of their career, living abroad. So it was like hard work, but really fun.
Yeah.
Just a really good growing up exercise, and like traveling and, just living in a different country was amazing. And it probably wouldn't be in Australia now if I hadn't have gone through that experience. Okay. So that was amazing. Off the back of that, I managed to get a bigger job in that company because I had built a bit of a profile, I guess, through this project.
Yeah.
So I moved to France and I was there for 2.5 years.
Casually.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And again, like that was such a life-defining experience, like landing in a country pre-smartphones where I don't speak the language.
I was about to ask, did you learn the language to go there or just...
I worked for an American company, so business language was English, but obviously, it's not, you need conversational French to get by. So I picked up okay.
Okay.
And I was there for a couple of years, and that's around the time that the whole Enron situation happened, and that's when Arthur Andersen kind of basically disappeared as a company. Like a 100-year-old company just stopped overnight.
Wow.
So that's always left a little memory for me around the importance of scenario planning stuff, because people think, well, that could never happen to us, and
it's happened, and it has.
Yeah, and
it can.
That experience just totally showed me that it can happen. So, so that kind of part of my career, I guess, when I came out of Arthur Andersen, I built up really good understanding of like delivering IT cross geographical borders, like regional IT. Yeah, global IT work. I wasn't client facing, I was internal facing. And this was probably around the time where outsourcing, offshoring was becoming a real thing.
Okay.
So over the next few years, I kind of moved around a bit, did some work setting up IT delivery capabilities in places like Malaysia, worked in like consumer goods companies. And part of my career, that phase one, kind of came to an end when I moved to Australia, because my first job in Australia was working on a big IT offshoring program. And did it for like 18 months. And at the end of it, it all went through and we signed the contract and everyone was high-fiving and people got paid bonuses and stuff. And then 150 people didn't have a job.
Wow.
And I was like, you know what? This isn't really what I want to do anymore. Like, this feels value excretive. It's not like value adding. And I just never felt those contracts actually work. The whole purpose of them it just felt like it was never built on a solid foundation. So I went through that and I thought, you know what? I love working in tech. And I love working in tech as a non-engineer because it makes me think about the problem in a different way. And I think it makes me think a lot about communication and how to communicate and bridge technical and non-technical. Yes. I mean, there's no such thing as technical and non-technical, right? It's a very broad scale, but how to bridge that gap between very technical and less technical.
And translating that.
Yeah. And I think I had a good commercial foundation then. So working in organizations where you need to build a business case and you need to understand enough about the tech so you can analyze, is this actually going to solve a problem or not? Is it going to deliver value? So I kind of came out of that job and I thought, I want to move into something where it's much more about tech for growth, not tech for cost cutting.
Yes.
And that was kind of ushered in like phase two of said 3 phases. So
you always do things in threes.
You know that, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But I went to REA Group, so realestate.com, and this was very much in the early days of REA before it was, I guess, the case study poster child for like agile and everything that it is now. And it was a very different company. The IT shop wasn't really doing that well. It had a lot of change. New CEO had come in, new CIO. But it was amazing for me personally. I often call it like a mini MBA because I worked alongside some people who will always be lifelong friends and who were incredibly good at what they did. And no one was really talking about DevOps then, for example.
Yeah.
And as a non-technical person coming in, I looked at DevOps and was like, this is a people and culture thing. It's not a tech thing. Whereas a lot of technical people came in and said, well, what DevOps tool are we going to buy? And I'm like, don't think that's what this is. This is about like how to create
people
autonomous,
and processes,
self-contained teams. And I remember hiring like an operations person who I worked really hard to recruit. I remember walking into the kitchen area upstairs and he just looked like devastated. And I'm like, how's it going? And he's like, it's really hard at the moment. And my wife's got me sleeping on the couch. And I'm like, oh, okay. This is a personal thing. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, and he's like, well, because the pager keeps going off so much. And I'm like, okay, well, you, like the one we give you? He's like, yeah. So I kind of dug into this conversation more with him and then realized that there was a whole bunch of stuff just going off and alerting in our kind of tech environment. Right. And it was kind of waking him up every night. But the people who were doing the build, they didn't get paged. So
they didn't care or didn't know.
They didn't
probably.
know.
Yeah.
Right? So I kind of took him up to see one of the dev teams and I said, hey, do you know you got woken up like 7 times last night to respond to something that's not even worth responding to? And they're like, oh, that's terrible. Let's stop alerting on that thing. Let's fix that. And then I walked away from that meeting thinking that actually feels like what DevOps is. Yeah. It's like, when you separate the upside and the downside of doing something to different groups, like that's not a good place to be. So I guess that kind of opened my eyes to DevOps and started to think about, and it was a lot of people thought it was a bad idea for me to do that because I had all the ops people in my team. Like, well, what if you'd get rid of that and all of these really smart operations people go and work in the engineering squads, what does that mean for you? And I'm like, well, if I do this and it works, that's a good thing for everybody. I'll find something else. So we went through that. I got to see Agile up close.
Okay.
And not with a lens of critiquing it all the time, which probably, Agile with a capital A or whatever, but I got to see, okay, I know how things work normally with projects and waterfall and stuff. I get to see something up close. This makes sense. This feels a lot more like
probably
it should be.
Probably in its prime too.
Yeah, early days. Yeah. I mean, having lots of people being Agile coaches, which was a good thing. So I guess like REA was it was a great education for me. It really was like an MBA. and just a hugely enjoyable, like 4 years of my life. Like,
Yeah.
loved it. I think at that point, whenever I go and talk to people outside of REA, they'd say to me, talk about what REA was doing, and they're like, go and talk to banks or whoever, and they're like, oh yeah, but it's REA. Like, everyone's under one roof. That's easy. It doesn't work here for all these reasons. I'm like, fair enough. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and work next in like a regulated environment where it's harder, and see, does the same things work?
That's very cool that you challenge yourself with that.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, I've got to find the right thing. So
Yeah.
I moved to work for Tabcorp, and the CIO then, who is just she's retired now, and she sits on a few boards, and she's just one of the best people I've worked with. I love her to bits. And I remember in the interview and her being really blunt with like, this is where we're at, this is what we need to do. And this was kind of early days of all of the the wagering, the British and Irish bookmakers coming into Australia. Northern Territories had opened up. The monopoly for Tabcorp was gone. They'd gone from really being a bricks and mortar business primarily to now being a digital business. And I was digital employee number one, kind of.
Oh, wow,
So
okay.
there was a couple of people in different areas doing digital work, but I kind of landed with the view of like, we need to bring digital back in rather than outsourcing it, build up a capability, think about how you use digital, not just online, but in retail as well. And I came out of the interview thinking, sport and racing, like, it's a bit of a blank slate. And if you can do it here, you should be able to do it kind of anywhere.
Did you go in the role of the head of digital transformation, or did you start in a different role there?
Yeah, at the time it was kind of GM of digital, working under IT.
Okay.
And then the role kind of just grew, I guess, a bit wider, and kind of brought product in and some aspects of digital marketing as well. And it was just really fun. Like, we rebuilt a whole bunch of digital assets, brought them back in-house. We moved into it. I mean, there's no better case study for using cloud than wagering, because you build all of your projections around Melbourne Cup.
Yeah.
And then if you pay for all that capacity for the whole year, it's like, what's the point? So at the time, I think when I took that role, everything was running on-prem. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It just makes you realize
Yeah.
how fast things have changed. So kind of moving into AWS, and that was just really fun. I think at the time, I think there was something in the AWS T's and C's that you couldn't run wagering workloads in AWS.
Really?
And I think we managed to work with them to change something locally so that it was like, unless it's legal in your jurisdiction or something.
So was that more of a regulatory component, or was that just the policy of AWS?
I'm pretty sure that was an AWS policy thing back then.
Okay.
So I remember there's one of the guys I'm still connected with at AWS, and I think his first meeting on his first like week with Amazon was with me, and I still deal with him a bit now as like an AWS partner.
Yeah, right.
But we were trying to make some of this stuff up as we went along, and it was really fun. So Tab was amazing. Stayed there for a while, and then I went to Telstra, which was kind of the next level up of complexity, and that was running a big digital transformation program. And it was a different challenge, but again, some of the people that I met there, like my boss, which was at the time, he was a big reason why I took the role. Just a great digital strategy mind. He was also my boss when I had my first child.
Oh, wow.
And he was such a family first person. And it just kind of highlighted to me that you can have the best policies in the world, but if you don't have senior people living them, it doesn't apply. And when my second child came along, I was like very premature, and there's a few complications, and Telstra just took incredible care of me through that.
That's amazing.
They were great, and that my boss there in particular, and some of my peers at Telstra were just fantastic people. But I think I got to the end of that second phase, which was like kind of REA, Tab, Telstra. What next? And this was probably big data days.
Yes.
So spent so much of my time building digital channels, and the usage data for those channels starts flowing in, and you start like, okay, there's a whole bunch of interesting things you can do with this data. And I got to the point where I'm like, I'd love to do something for myself. Like, I feel like I want to get off the corporate experience for a little while. Like, I feel like a bit of a change, it's
In-house specifically?
Yeah, well, just obviously the bigger the corporate, usually the slower things move.
Yeah.
And I think as I got to the bigger end of town, like, I struggled a lot with the amount of celebration that would go into like getting the business case approved to do something. Like, I haven't done anything. Kind of got the money, but we haven't actually built anything. And those organizations work like that for a reason. But it just, my motivation and what I drew like encouragement from was like doing stuff. showing things and changing things. And the bigger the organization, I think the harder it is to drive change. And I just kind of could see a path where I'm like, well, I'm staying in Australia. This is like, am I going to stay doing this long term, or am I going to do something a bit different? And I really wanted to do something by myself. I thought data and AI was the place to do it. And that kind of ushered in, I guess, phase 3, which is where I'm now with Mantle Group. And at the time, I thought, yeah, this feels like something in this data and AI thing, but I've never run a professional services company before. So many blind spots, like no clue how to do this operationally. And that's when I obviously got connected with, through one of my closest friends who's at Mantle now with me, got connected to some of the folks who were starting Mantle, and they'd obviously been in the professional services business for a long time. And the whole idea of Mantle Group then was having a few different brands, and they're looking for people who can lead a brand and come up with a value proposition. But a lot of the operational elements of running a professional services company will be taken care of in the center. So it felt to me like, okay, this is a really good fit for what I'm good at. And there's really good protection for where I've got my biggest gaps.
Okay, so Eliza wasn't first. Eliza was embedded into Mantle Group at the get-go. Right.
So when Mantle Group started, we had Mantle Group, Digio, and Eliza as like 3 brands. And the idea was the brands would be really specialized in market, really good at what they do. And as we grew, launched new brands, either through like incubation or through acquisition, they would slot in and we'd kind of brought our capability. And that's nearly 8 years later. So
that's amazing.
it's the longest I've ever been in one place, that's for sure. And because every year has been so different, right? And it feels like every year has been completely different. So as business goes through that evolution. But I mean, it's just been so enjoyable to be in a business from the beginning, like it, and there's been a lot of times it's been so hard. And obviously when you're also like invested, you put your own, me and my wife were about to buy a house, and I came home and said, hey,
I want to buy a business.
That, let's invest in this business and see where it goes. And we just had our second kid as well. So there was a lot of reasons why it wasn't a good time to do it, but it felt to me like it was the right group of people more than anything. And when we navigated periods like COVID, we navigated them because we had the right people in the room, but everyone also very much kind of in principles and how they made decisions felt like, one of us.
So that's phase 3. How are you going to go with a phase 4? Because you only work in 3s.
That'll be it, right?
Phase 3 is just longer.
I'll just have to go back to phase kind of 1.1 or something.
Oh yeah, I think that'll work.
So, I mean, it's so hard to think about what next, because I'm just, Mantle is everything professionally. It has been for so long.
Yeah, and I think, the tech landscape is just growing and growing at an exponential rate. No one knows what's next. And I think that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah.
I feel, especially in the roles that you've done, you enjoy that transformation. You enjoy kind of learning what's next.
Yeah.
And that makes the role what it is in reality. When you mentioned that you started off in IT, not necessarily technical, did you do any degree prior to that?
I started.
You started?
I started actually doing economics and finance.
Is this because you wanted to be a diplomat?
That is very true. I was kind of between that and the Royal Navy for me. That's because those were 2 things that I was really interested in. But economics just felt like in hindsight, I chose it because I thought it was the right thing to do, rather than I chose it because it was a good fit for me. And I just found it so boring, and I kind of dropped after a while.
Look, I did it in year 11. The one thing I remember is liquidity.
Yeah. Remembered more than I did, and I did it for 2 years. But it was a good grounding, but it was just never really for me. And there's been multiple times where I've come close to going back to maybe, I would kind of, especially like, I want to set a good example for my kids. I'd like to finish university at some point, but I think it's probably it bothers me more than it really is a thing. I think a degree is great for your first job. And then I remember working with my boss at Telstra, who's German. Just in Europe, people, he had like a PhD, and most people in senior roles had done bachelor's, master's, postgrad, business school. It's a huge investment, but
it is a huge investment.
They do it for a very good reason. So it's certainly not that I don't value it. I think it's really important. It just, the way that life kind of played out for me. And it's not like anyone, these days no one cares. What if I'd done a degree 20 odd years ago, probably more, then it wouldn't be relevant. It wouldn't be that relevant anyway, especially not in what I'm doing today. Right?
Yeah, I think, it's just hands-on experience of you don't necessarily have to have a degree. I had a conversation yesterday, actually, with a previous guest in saying that I think degrees now, some of them may become redundant because it's more hands-on experience and the rate at which technology is going, you know, no one can be an expert. It's more hands-on learning than it is a degree. But there are some professions like a doctor, a heart surgeon, that I would
Yeah.
expect you have one. But I don't think it's necessary for the industry that we're in because
Yeah,
it's
agree.
very much hands-on. Is there anything that you focused in on learning that accelerated the career that you have? Or was it more just hands-on experience? Because you mentioned the MBA. Well, it was like an MBA.
Yeah.
But was there any kind of formal training that you did that accelerated?
Nothing formal. I think areas that I focused on a lot were communication, and the more experience I've had, a lot of senior people in organizations, most CEOs in Australia, I don't have the stats in front of me, but most CEOs come from like an accounting background. Like
Really?
as I recall, if you look to the ASX, I'd love to actually pull the data, and I'm not pretending I have, but
We should
if you
do
look
that
at
and
it,
put
we
it in.
should do it. But I think you find like the most common kind of background for CEOs would be finance.
Yeah, right.
And I think a lot of people a lot of executives, board members, like don't fully understand technology. And I've always just felt like there's part of my role is to make sure that you can articulate technical investment in technology, risk, trade-offs
Yeah.
in commercial language. And I think that's just something that I've always worked on. And I think part of the benefit of not being a software engineer is just being, I have to frame things my own way. I know enough about tech and I know what good looks like. I know what good questions to ask. So I've, I've always been able to get by, but I think for me that kind of communication has just been so critical. And I think like with my kids now at school, and what are they going to learn? Communication, working with other people. Those are the things that go away, right? A lot of what you do day to day
Completely.
will. I guess I've always liked people. I enjoy being around people, and
Yeah.
I'm one of those people who has a bit of an urge to please sometimes. So I like to, I
Okay.
like to do good job. I
Yes.
take pride in doing things well, and I take pride in, I like building relationships with people, and a lot of people I've worked with will be lifelong friends, as I've already said. So I think all those things together have just kind of worked out. And, the REA time was really critical as well. It's just that was the mini MBA, and a lot of other things feel like it built on top.
Yeah. I do find that communication is that underrated skill for a lot of people. And when you start going into leadership, it becomes more critical to be able to do. You can definitely be a technical leader, but there is that element of, especially in consulting, but really anywhere, the ability to be able to bridge the gap between both and translate for people. And I know I always bully you pretty much about your threes, but that was one of the best things because I asked you when we were going into meetings, stakeholders or really anyone that we were just trying to understand the situation and what was the best way forward, you were always able to just listen and distill the information. And you always said, let me just play it back. And it was always three things. Always three things. And I thought, how did you do that? And it was fascinating to me because it was just a really clear way to, one, know that you've heard the person and play back the key pain points for them. But you were able to distill it in a way that made sense for them, but also made sense for you. And it wasn't too technical, but you had the ability to then take that away and make something out of it. And I remember asking you about it, and you were like, oh, I always do things in threes. Is that something you've always done, or is that advice you've had from someone else?
I have a feeling that I think someone may give me the advice sometimes. I just, I don't know whether it was like, here's a strategy for you, but it was like, can you just distill this down to three things for me?
Yeah.
And I remember going through the process of it and thinking, that's actually quite a good way for it.
I might put that in my back pocket.
I found a lot as well. If ever I was doing a presentation, or if I was ever like talking at an event, I always felt if I broke it down into three things, it was a lot easier for me to remember my flow. And I quite enjoy presenting,
Yep.
but I do get nervous. And
Okay.
if I get off to a good start,
It will flow.
it flows through.
Okay.
I'm a big sports fan, and one of my favorite sports is the NFL, American football. And I love how they script the first 10 plays. So you know exactly what they're going to do the first 10
It's
plays.
very strategic.
Very strategic. And after that, then obviously see how the game's going and change it up. I've kind of always applied that with presentations, which is like, we wouldn't, but I want the first, few minutes
First
to be
phase.
to be very like tightly
Yeah.
understood. So I could literally recite word for word what I'm going to say without looking at anything.
Okay.
And then after that, I know that I'll loosen up and I'll relax a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas if I make a mistake or I lose my train of thought in the first few minutes, I'll usually, that'll be about the presentation.
Really? Okay.
So the three things was also part of that. Like, I have three solid things that I remember and kind of build on it. And I had like your point around listening. I had my boss when I moved to France, an English lady called Karen, and she's amazing. And I remember she sat in on my first one-to-one. Basically, when I moved to France, the first time I had a team.
Oh, okay.
And I was like 22, so
Oh,
I was
wow.
like a bit, I mean, I think they were quite optimistic giving me the job, but it was kind of a small team, it was like 8 people or something. A team, and she sat in. She's like, I want to sit in on your first one-to-one. I'm like, okay. So we had the one-to-one, and the guy left, and she said, "How do you think that went?" I was like, "It's great." She goes, "That was terrible." And I was like,
Really?
"What do you mean?" And she wasn't quite that blunt. She's pretty paraphrasing what she was. And she's like, "You didn't listen. You asked him a question, and then he gave you half an answer, and then you basically just told him what you would do." And so she's like, "You need to active listening." I don't know. It really stuck with me, and it makes a difference when I'm talking to someone. If I know that, and you can tell when you're talking to someone if they're already thinking about what they're going to say next.
Oh, easily.
It's so obvious, right? And people can try and hide it, but you know that at that point you could say anything, and it's not going
Doesn't
to make
matter.
a difference. That doesn't feel great to be on the receiving end of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember having feedback. Otherwise, someone's like, you can be a bit intense sometimes, but I think it's intense because you're really listening. And I'm like, and maybe that's the downside of it. It comes off that way. But I did, like, especially if it's something important, like you and I have been in meetings with team members who are going through a difficult time on a project, for example.
Yes.
And I think it's like, my phone needs to go off and I need to listen. I need to make notes, and we need to do something about it. I don't want to miss something important. And I think that's important for building trust. And we have our primary responsibility is to people and doing the right thing by them. I think that's where I think that listening is just so important.
For me, I think intentional listening, because there is a difference between just listening to react and just to give a response, or intentional listening to actually digest the information and then later on do something about it. And I think you're very good at intentionally listening to people and understanding the problem and not even thinking about a solution in that moment. Like, you probably are, but you've parked it for the time being, because ultimately there's something to be said of strategic thinking, and you can zoom out and give a high level of that. Sometimes you do have to go bottom up with people, and you do have to bring them on the journey and take them through that process by listening to their pain points first before you give a solution, even if you may know it. And I think that skill, the more and more leaders I talk to, that's the one thing that, irrespective about tech, it's always listening, and communication is the key areas that they've had to work on and continuously worked on in their career.
Yeah, 100%.
The other thing I wanted to ask, in terms of, I guess, that strategic view for yourself, how do you go from a strategic lens to an operational lens?
I think firstly you have to kind of know yourself. I think, and humans are really good at going back to what they know best, right, and where they're most comfortable. So firstly, knowing, am I more likely to think about a problem operationally, or am I going to think about it strategically? And then I think reflecting on the week that's been as well, like how much am I focused on the next week versus the next 6 months versus the next 3 months? Am I thinking about the right things? So for me, it's a bit like, firstly, just being really understanding myself and knowing what lens I'm more likely to put on something. Am I feeling really operational at the moment because I'm under a lot of pressure operationally? Therefore, I'm going to see every problem as an operational problem. So that self-reflection is important.
I guess it's depending on whether you're going through an operational change at that time. So that's where the lens comes in, and I guess that's what you're inclined to be thinking about in the meetings. Or is it that someone has an operational problem and you have to kind of switch hats?
One of my favorite case studies around like reinventing businesses. It's like around this. It's called the Toyota Way. It's by Jeffrey Iker.
Yeah.
Got this case study about how they came up with the idea of the Prius. And I talk about this one quite a lot. 'Cause it always really resonated with me. But they're making a Toyota Camry every year. I'm paraphrasing, so if I get some of this wrong, it's a broad brush.
Someone will come at you for that. Yeah,
surely.
I'm sure.
But I mean, so they're making the Camry every year, and every year they make it a little bit.
Yeah.
And it does work really well. So you do the same thing. And then someone comes along and says, well, what if people don't want to buy the Camry next year? What happens then?
That's fair.
And we're like, well, that's a good question, and we should probably think about that. But we're already busy making the Camrys. How are we going to do that? So with the Prius, they kind of said, well, let's take a group of people, like representatives from design, like manufacturing, sales, finance, whatever, and let's give them like a really high level set of like guiding principles and see what they come up with.
Okay.
So they said it's going to be a car of the future, which means it's kind of small on the outside, big on the inside. So good interior space, small, bunch of other things. And then it has to do like 50 plus miles per gallon.
Okay.
So super economical. So this group, and when you've come up with it, you have to go back into your day job and work on it. So if you work in manufacturing, you have to go and, build it. If you work in sales, you have to go and convince your peers to sell it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And they came up with all these aspects of it, and it was fine apart from the economy, the fuel economy. So they said, well, it's not possible. They said, well, you have to do it. That's your thing. So then someone found this R&D department that would come up with this thing called a hybrid engine. And of course, that's what was in the Prius, which was the first hybrid. They ended up patenting that. They licensed that tech, and that was the first hybrid car. So I think a big part of it for me is like, if you're still making the Camry in a few years, people aren't going to be buying it, and you need to start thinking about that. So that for me is, how do you take yourself away from the day-to-day frequently and get the right people together? And I love doing this at Mantle. Right?
Yeah.
Saying, well, what we sell today, or what people, the services people have consumed from us in the last year, what will that look like in 3 years? What will that look like with generative AI? What does that look like with lots of different things? So that for me is kind of the strategic side of it. And also, I think time horizons are really important. So when I transitioned out of my Eliza role into the partner role I'm in now, one of my considerations was like, I want to be focused on like the 3 months plus time horizon. And then that way I'm like, I'm not going to look at the KPIs for last week.
Okay.
Because that's someone else. But my focus is going to be, which are the new accounts we want to be working with? What are the new partnerships we want to be having? Like, what are some new offerings we want to go and get out to market? And that should start bearing fruit in a slightly longer time frame. But that's what I'm going to focus on, because there are smart enough people running the business who are better at doing that than I am. Right. So let them get on with it. Let me think about the next phase. So for me, it's often just, for me, it's not really just a context switch thing. I have to really pull myself and devote time to
be intentional about it. Because I think if you're doing that, do you have your own, you would obviously have your own KPIs and all that kind of thing that you want to hit, but do you also take time for yourself to just extract and have a look at what that might look like? Like have your own kind of brainstorming session with yourself to identify opportunities in that particular area?
I do. I mean, I find that generally I get most of my energy from being around other people. And there's so many people that like just, you go in to have a different conversation, but just the way that person just approaches the problem just makes you think differently, and then you take that thinking elsewhere. So for me, it's more around people and ideas.
Yes.
And that's where that's where you get the multiplier effect, where it's not just like 1 + 1 = 2. No. It's like more. And it's, you know what I mean?
It's more.
It's
good
1
math.
+ 1 is still 2.
It is still
just
2.
To be really clear. But yeah, it's just that multiplier effect of like your skills combined with someone else's is just like, takes a big jump.
I had to rethink about the math problem then. When we're obviously coming in to help a client or they've got a problem, does the data that they have inform the decision that they've made to bring us on? Or is there a prior point in time where they need to obtain the data points to then determine what a decision might be? Because I'm just trying to understand, it's very much a chicken and egg situation of, if you have a really big company, is it that the data that they have informs the problem that they have and that therefore need to fix? Or is it that someone's made a decision to then obtain data to then determine what could be better?
I think most of the time, most of the calls that like I take now from clients is there's so much stuff that we could do. Where do we start? Why? How do we get a level of confidence in what we can actually deliver in the next 12 months?
Yeah.
And we make sure that our team are bought into that, our stakeholders are bought into it. I think that's the big challenge at the moment is everyone has great ideas, but it's that transition from like ideas to execution. And if I think about most of our clients will have a challenge with that today.
Yes.
Either they're at the early stage of the funnel and they're trying to do the business case for the next 12 months, or they're a year in and it's either gone really well and then they're being asked to spend double next year. And it's like, okay, how do we scale that? Or it's POCs. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but for me, it mostly just comes down to, there's no shortage of ideas. It's more around execution is the really hard part of the equation.
I agree. And especially if you're coming in, everyone has ideas. How do you broach the conversations where everyone's business problem is always going to be the same, very similarly? It's obviously dependent on the industry, but how do you broach having a conversation with someone who maybe has gone to a conference or has heard a new piece of software and tool, especially with AI, that it solves a problem? It may not solve the problem that they have, but they feel they need it. Do you find that's a narrative that you're having to kind of circumvent at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, probably not something that I have to circumvent, but I think it's certainly that a lot of our clients are kind of dealing with that. Like, CEO's just got something from Gartner and is super obsessed with this thing and we want to do it. Someone, like an AI product company has hit up our CEO.
Yeah.
They're very excited. And how do we actually determine if this is the right thing for us or it's going to solve the problem? Common one has been procurement, for example. Like, okay, normally when we're buying something, we engage procurement and they ask a bunch of questions. What are your SLAs and all this stuff? And then when you and I have been on projects before where it's like, looking at using AI and it's like, well, there's a whole different set of questions you need to ask with AI that you don't normally ask with a software solution or a software project. And what are those questions and what could go wrong? And how do you articulate the risk? And what's an acceptable level of risk? And how will this AI perform in Australia versus how will it perform in a different geography with different situations? Like my favorite example was years and years ago when Volvo's autonomous vehicle program was incredibly good at dealing with large animals like moose type size on the roads in Scandinavia. But when they brought it to Australia, couldn't deal with kangaroos because whenever a kangaroo left the ground, it like tricked out computer vision because basically an animal had to have one foot on the ground for it to detect it at the time.
Wow.
So just kangaroos. And it's like, well, that's
Defeats
a
the
classic
purpose,
example of localization, right? And, AI performs very differently in different conditions. And often when we're talking to a client, it's like, how do you empirically evaluate performance in your environment? And that's not like a simple exam question, quite a complicated question to answer. And it needs data, it needs a level of expertise, maybe not necessarily people who program AI systems or build them, but it needs people who understand how these things work, can develop like an evaluation criteria.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I mean, that example is amazing. Irrespective of the industry, I think also looking at your competitors, there is an element of a competitor analysis that you could do. But I think with emerging tech at the moment, really identify if you have the same problem and if that problem needs solving or if there's something else that you could be doing. Because I think getting too caught up in what your competitors are doing rather than looking at, do you actually need a fancy new AI or do you need, something very simple to rectify a problem that you have that can bring 10x? Like, I think those conversations, it would be very interesting to hear because it is balancing between you want to be able to implement the thing or the new thing and be at the forefront. At the same time, you need to really take stock and be aware of what the actual problem is that needs solving.
And there's so many things like where we started this topic, right? There's so many things you can do. The question is like, which one's going to drive the most value and where do we start? And also there might be like a use case that's incredibly valuable, but when you look at it from a feasibility lens, yeah, there's some papers out there in academia on how to do this, but it's not a well-trodden path.
No.
And most corporates in Australia, do they want to be the first people to try? Probably not. So
It's like
maybe
that
start
bell
with
curve.
something different.
Is there anything that you're seeing at the moment, especially with industry leaders or people accelerating ahead in data and AI specifically? Is there anything you're seeing that's quite exciting and new?
I mean, I think the last few years have been crazy because I mean, we started doing AI stuff in like 2017, 18, and
Yeah,
it was experiments, and it was, machine learning was a new thing, going from like expert systems that were hard coded with rules to like more generalist problems using machine learning and deep learning. And it was kind of good, but it's still quite abstract. The systems were still quite flaky. It was really hard to get past a proof of concept. You fast forward to, what is it now, like 2-3 years ago when AI came out, where ChatGPT came.
Yeah.
And that just sparked a huge change in the way people were thinking about AI. And it suddenly, I mean, for me, it was one of my peers, I think, described it as it's like AI's iPhone was ChatGPT. It was like a consumer, like something you could touch and use every day with AI. That was huge. I think now, like seeing what we're able to do with agents, agentic AI, it just pieces all of this jigsaw together for me. When we started doing our stuff in 2018, you could build a little bit of AI for a little bit of the problem, but that was never the whole answer. You could automate a manual process by 20%, but it was expensive to do that work. So that it's really hard to recoup the ROI. You need 20% less a person, right? Maybe you can reduce the team a little bit, but it's hard to show the ROI. I think what we're seeing now is I can do really complicated tasks that require talking to people, interfacing with third-party systems. I can do that with agents that talk to each other. And if you were building a company, if you think about any industry, if you were building a company today, you would not be thinking about it as a people problem. You'd be thinking about this is an agent problem. And how do you build a scalable business using agents? I find it absolutely mind-blowing. And to think what corporate Australia will look like in 10 years.
Oh, I don't think anyone knows what that looks like.
I mean, it feels like it's going to be huge disruption and that there's going to be a wave of new companies coming out that will just require a lot less people and will be a lot more profitable and efficient.
Yeah.
And that's going to be good. And it's also introduce a whole bunch of problems. I mean, if my kids are going to study at uni, I absolutely wonder what will the job situation look like for them. And this idea that we'll just all work less and that the benefits of automation will be shared with everybody, it's not how it's going to work.
No.
There will be companies that will make more profit from this. That's not just trickle down to the rest of the world. So it just seems like there's so much potential upside, but also so much risk at the same time.
On the risk side, because I do see the potential of it, and I understand people's concerns about, it's going to take my job kind of thing, but I had a conversation with someone at work who was having a conversation, I believe, with their parents or someone, and they were like, AI is going to take over and, it's going to take our jobs, and they were just like, AI is not going to take over. I'm going to take over the world with me
AI.
using AI.
Yeah.
Because it needs to have a human element.
I've heard that a few times people say, you're not going to lose your job to an AI, you're going to lose your job to someone who uses AI better.
Correct.
I think that's very true.
How do you streamline that? However, on the other side, I did see something recently, and it's more impactful for a younger generation who obviously are using it at school, and that's fine. But I saw a video of a Hungry Jack's drive-through, and rather than having a little teenager taking your order, it's now AI. And that's just taken out a whole line of jobs for people at that age who are learning communication skills and independence. And I do wonder, it's not something that they can use AI with. So there will be a risk there. So I'm interested to see what new jobs spark if they're being taken away rather than just taking away and there's no replacement.
Yeah, I mean, I think since there's been some great things that have happened since COVID, right? With people being flexibility, being just working remotely is just more acceptable.
Yeah.
But I've got my couple of nieces in the UK, and the oldest is graduated a few years ago. And her and a partner, he works for a big bank and works from home more than he works from the office. And when I was 24, I wasn't very good at what I didn't know how to do things well in a corporate environment. And you learn that by seeing other people, by getting feedback. And I don't know how many people have called someone up after a Zoom call and gone, hey, the way you presented that on that Zoom call, you could have done it a bit differently here. It's really hard to give feedback on an online interaction. It's just different. So I think you combine the fact that we are working a bit more remotely with a lot more of the day-to-day, maybe going to AI, and you think, how, like, as a young person, am I going to build the foundations of a solid career? And so, I think I'm generally a glass half full person, so I think you should always see like the upside. And
I agree.
To a degree, like, I mean, genie's out of the lamp now, whatever it is the saying, right? It's out. It's there. I mean, it's not going to just stop.
The other, I guess the last question, two other questions. Is there anything that you're currently looking at within your career that is exciting to you, or anything that you're learning, or anything you're particularly excited about? Not necessarily what you're seeing with clients and the work that's been doing, but something that you have seen and you're like, wow, that's something really interesting to me.
I mean, kind of what I talked about with some of the agentic AI stuff, that's occupying a lot of my mind. I think just generally, just the last few years, I've just started reading a lot more. Like I just find everything from kind of history to fiction to non-fiction, just really enjoy reading. And part of it's like, I want to make sure I set a good example for my kids. And I now have a Goodreads battle with my daughter, who's going to read the most books. And I'm ahead by one because she's not far behind me at all. And she's 10. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's getting pretty competitive in our house. But I don't know, I just feel like there's so much that we can learn about from what's happened in the past as well.
Yes.
So I do love reading about history. I do love reading about fiction, as much as I do non-fiction. So there's not one thing where I'm like, this is something that I'm going to devote a big percentage of my brain capacity to.
Yeah.
But I think just generally, I'm just turning, at my old age, I'm turning into a bit of a sponge.
Old age.
Yeah, it's knocking on a bit these days. So I feel like I'm turning into a bit of a sponge, and I'm really enjoying just kind of reading and thinking about stuff a bit more.
Outside of your career and obviously reading, is there anything that you're doing outside of work that you're learning?
I mean, parenting is learning every day. So, I mean, honestly, I've started like coaching my son's soccer team, and I know I'm just at that stage of my life where I'm quite time poor with family and making good priority calls. So I think the thing I'm learning the most is like, I've had a couple of family members pass away in the last year. And a couple of other ones who've come down with quite serious illnesses that are pretty debilitating. And the message from these people has always been the same. It's like, don't wait to do stuff. Don't wait to do that trip with your partner, or take your kid to that thing they really want to do, or don't put it off for another year doing those things. So there's a big part of me at the moment. It's like, everyone has to be responsible and do the right thing for the future, but also it's just kind of enjoy what you're doing now. If you've kind of in the third, fourth, fifth year of your career and you've kind of know what you want to do now and you're a bit more established, like, enjoy it, like, make the most of it. Like, spend time with your friends, spend time with your family, do some traveling, do something you've never done before. And so I think that for me is a big thing. I think it's definitely been impacted by losing a few people close to me in the last 12 months. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
I think it's a good perspective realignment, because, I mean, from what you're saying, if you are obviously established at that point, because I'm seeing myself at the moment doing that. I'm very comfortable in the role that I am, and I'm really enjoying the work that I'm doing. And I realized I hadn't gone away since 2019. I thought, why? Why am I waiting to go for this perfect time? And I was like, no, I'm going to go away. I'm going to enjoy it. And you don't always have to accelerate. You don't always have to be growing, because you're going to grow regardless.
Yeah.
And then you may grow from reading fiction books, non-fiction books. I think it's not like you've hit pause and you just stop. You have to choose one or the other. You're going to grow irrespective. But I think, as you said, just really embracing that and enjoying the time you've got now.
And you've got your trip coming up, right? You're going to down tools for a period, and you your brain is you're gonna think about things. You'll probably be more inclined to reflect on the last year. There'll be something that you haven't really thought about that'll come front of mind. So just, taking time it's not just a pause, right? It's actually really useful.
Reflection, I
Yeah.
think. Final question. Is there anything that you would like to give some advice about, either coming into leadership or just generally in the tech landscape for anyone listening?
I think with leadership, I think it's so important for people who are coming into leadership roles to realize the importance of relationships with your peers in a leadership role. Often people who've been in roles either as an individual contributor or perhaps running a small team, it's kind of like you can do what you get the job done yourself.
Yeah.
I think when you move into a leadership role, in some ways you have more influence, but less execution capability, and it's a little bit more around you need to spend the time, and this is definitely one piece of advice to give to anyone in the leadership team, is build relationships with people, spend time with them, pick up the phone and call people occasionally, say, hey, how's it going, what's going on,
I
and talk
appreciate you
about
doing
stuff.
that.
It's really important, I think, because it's way more personal.
Yeah.
And you don't want to call someone the first time because you need them to do something. You want to have a foundation of a relationship. And still surprises me today, right? When you see people in a leadership role, and there's an escalation or something, it's like, well, have you picked up the phone and called them? Or no?
Yeah.
So I think in leadership roles, the first thing you have to accept is that there's nowhere to pass the buck to after that. That's the whole purpose of being in a leadership role. You're the last, you're kind of the goalkeeper, right? You're the last person in the line to do something about it. So you can't just pass it up the chain because there is no chain. So I think you need to rely more on your peers, and that is where those relationships are so important. So that's probably I think, and especially in this age at the moment where we are doing so much more remotely, and people are dispersed around geographically. Allocate. Okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours a week building a relationship with some of my peers, and make sure it's good coverage, not just the ones I work with every day, but the broader set. I'm going to go for a coffee with them when I'm traveling to Sydney next week, or I'm going to just pick up the phone and call the person who I've maybe spoken to a couple of times. I think that will just stand you in good stead.
I think it gives back tenfold, because for me personally, last year as well, you would call me, and before I'd obviously gone on that program, it hadn't happened previously. When you did that, it wasn't about, this thing needs to be done. Yeah, never. It was always about how I was doing, how the team was doing. Is there anything you could help me with? And that was it. I was like, oh, okay. And it was just, it's a sign of respect for both parties, but also it just provides that level of safety and, I guess, respect of someone and what I would aspire to be as a leader. Because for me, a true leader is never too busy. And I guess that's why obviously I wanted to do the podcast, is I think a lot of people believe that anyone in leadership positions, whether it's a partner, head of, or C-suite, they're untouchable. And I don't think that's the case. I understand that there is a level of, you are a lot busier, you have a lot more on your plate, but I don't think anyone is too busy as a leader to reach out and just ask how people are.
No, 100%. And I think if you're on a leadership role and you're not accessible, you shouldn't be in it, right? I mean, your primary reason as a leader is it's the people who are around you need to support. So I think, calling people makes such a big difference. To be honest, even when we would talk, I would get the most insightful commentary around the work when we're not talking about the work.
Yeah.
Because if I book a meeting with you to talk about the project, what are you going to do? You're going to prep, you're going to go through, you're going to give the message. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the right thing to do. But having the conversation, I say, how's the team? You say, well, this is good, this is good. Oh, so-and-so's really struggling at the moment because of this thing. And I'm like, what's that thing? I haven't heard about that before. That's not come up. What's going on there? So I think it just helps you get a proper, honest assessment as well. Because people are, they will open up more when there's some trust there.
Yeah.
I think probably the other thing as well is, for people in leadership roles, how you socialize things with your peers for decision making. I've always been a really big believer in, I love a discussion paper. I hate slides. I just like to take the time. I loved I don't know if they even still do this, but Amazon used to have the kind of thing that you couldn't book a meeting without circulating the document first. And just being able to, just giving someone something that says, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Here's the things I've done to try and fix it. And maybe I want to proceed with this thing, and I want you to know I'm doing it. Immediately then, if you're the other person picking up, like, okay, I don't need to do anything here. I just need to read it and think about it. And if I have a strong opinion, give it. If not, that's fine.
Yeah.
Or it could be, here's the problem statement. We've tried 3 things. None of those 3 things have worked, and I don't know what to do now. But if you say that in the first 2 minutes, the whole meeting is going to be different, because the minute you say to someone, I don't know what to do and I need help, you will get everyone's best in the right company with the right people and leaders. You're going to get everyone's best version of themselves immediately. And the risk there is you're going to get 100 ideas. One of them might be the one you're looking for.
Yeah.
So I think just taking the time, especially as an emerging leader, taking the time to frame things for your people, make it easy for people to help you, or make it easy for people to make a decision. The amount of times I've been in meetings where someone's rambled on for half an hour, and you get to at the end of it, and I'm asking the question, trying to work out, like, what exactly do you want from this? Like, what are you asking? So I think just getting in the habit of, okay, I've got this meeting, I've got a slot in the agenda, here's what I want to get out of it.
And on that is understanding the audience that you're obviously talking to. At the same time, I know for me, it's something I need to work on as well. Anyone in leadership has obviously got a finite amount of time, obviously being available, but there is. In a meeting, if someone comes to you and just says, I don't know, immediately I'm putting that ownership on you to come up with a solution for me, rather than broaching a subject of, these are the things that I've tried, these are the things I think, can I get your feedback? And one of the areas that I'm working on, especially when talking to C-suite, is not just fire hosing at them all the time. Because I know I had that initially with you, and I was like, I've got to stop just giving you information, because you would then have to take the time out distilling all of that and then playing it back to me in what you've heard. So I tried really hard to digest the information first for myself and then playing that back to you, rather than just fire hosing, because you've probably been in a million of those during the day.
I mean, I think the fire hosing thing is okay in the right situation, but you can't, not every meeting can be like that, right? Not every session. So there are times where, I'm thinking of a couple of examples where I actually want the fire hose, because it's really important that I get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And I don't want the filtered version. When you've been working for someone longer and you know them and they know you, that's when it's a lot easier to go, this is what I think we need to do.
Yeah.
But like, you're right, the fire hosing thing, like, if anything, start with the summary and then go deep. You know, go, look, broad brush, this is the problem. I've tried a couple of things. This is what I think we should do. And then like, oh, okay, well, let's try and poke some holes in it.
Yeah.
And you can often say to someone, can you just poke some holes in my logic? Because I just want to make sure I've thought about everything. And that's a lot better situation than the person thinking they're here to give you the answer.
Yes.
Like, I think I have the answer, and I've pressure tested it a bit, but I just want someone else to pull it apart a bit, would be helpful. And I just think you get so much more value out of the conversation then when you set it up well.
I agree. That's all my questions.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Loved the chat. So thanks for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Data and Drams. A huge thank you once again to James for joining me and for sharing his career and leadership insights. If you loved this episode, I'd be thrilled if you took a moment to leave a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn over at Data and Drams for episode updates and my latest whiskey recommendations. Join me next time as we dive into another amazing career journey over a delicious drink. Until then, Slanjava.